It's my pleasure now to introduce Eric Rasmussen. Eric is the Vice President of Consumer Insights at Groupon, so please join me in welcoming Eric.
Am I on? Cool. Hi, everyone. Okay, great. So the timer just started. I've got about an hour's worth of material I'm going to squeeze into 10 minutes, so there will be no questions. Yeah, that was me at a great tea. I want to cover a bunch of things today, and I do love talking to researchers because, my peer group here, you guys tend to work like I do, which is off of data, off of hard, cold facts, as opposed to what is often around for a new industry like the one I'm working in, which is Groupon. But unfortunately, it's still an education process, so I do always feel like I have to spend the first couple minutes doing a little education where I will pummel you with a couple slides on or information about Groupon, because I was like you at one point before I started working there, and I had a lot of different conceptions about what it is. So that's myth busting, and then talk about value delivered, and then kind of get to the measurement challenge. So why did I join this? I worked at where did I work? Overture, and then Yahoo, and then eBay, and then Shutterfly. And I was at Shutterfly a couple years ago, and we decided to do a Groupon deal, which at the time I didn't know what the hell a Groupon deal was. And they tasked me to actually do the analysis on the back end. And our usual marketing type of results, we ended up getting mostly current users just getting a discount, a little bit of new users and some lapsed users. And what I found with the Groupon one was a completely different dynamic, where we were getting a huge amount of new users. We were able to convert lapsed users back from the dead, and a fair amount of current users. So that was fantastic. In fact, in my presentation to the executive board and Shutterfly, I said, basically, based on these results, we need to stop doing everything else we're doing in marketing and just do this if they'll allow us to do it all the time. I also had an experience on the personal end of Groupon, because in the part-time, I am also a part-time yoga instructor, and I was teaching at a new studio. If we had more time, I would get everyone involved in some group exercise here. But so I was helping a friend. She had opened a new studio in Palo Alto. If you know Palo Alto, you can't really walk around there without running into a yoga studio every block. Anyway, it was new, and I was teaching the 6 a.m. class, which isn't fun in the first place. And then I was getting about 2 people every class, which is no fun for me. It's not as much fun for the students. And I felt like after a month or two of this, this studio is not going to be around for long. They're going to fold. And then we did a Groupon, and I showed up the next day, and we suddenly had over 30 people in every class, and that continued on for a while. So I had experience both on the local end as well as the national end about the power of this, and became a big believer. And then eventually I got recruited to join the company, and that was an easy sell. Okay, I'm running through my time. So I'm going to just run through some big myths. I'm sure that you guys have heard different things about Groupon. There's a lot of stories out there. I'm trying to hit all the major myths. Groupon users are unattractive. By unattractive, I mean from a business standpoint, not actually. Yes, I'm sure we have some very attractive users of our service here. Only interested in discounts. They're one and done. They never return. Discounting my regulars. They don't spend more than the coupon. This association will hurt my brand and image, and the discounts kill my business. All these. And by the way, this is part of about a 50-slide deck, and I've addressed each of these in great detail, and I'm sure you as researchers would all enjoy the colorful graphs and the data and all this stuff, but we don't have time to go through all that. So I'm going to skip through it real quickly, and I will address that. But I wanted to talk about just satisfaction levels. And from 4C, which is a service that actually measures a bunch of different companies out there, they've been tracking this for a while. And Groupon satisfaction, if you just read the news, you would say, well, first of all, this is B2B. You'd say it's terrible for merchants, and they're all losing their shirts on it. Actually, the satisfaction with Groupon merchants is well above the average for B2B. In fact, you don't have to be a researcher to recognize that's significantly higher. And how about our consumers? Well, our consumers are more satisfied with Groupon than a lot of the other big names in the internet that you wouldn't necessarily put us in. We're still kind of neck and neck with Apple, but give me a break, that's like a religion. Okay, so let's go on to addressing all these different things. I'll go through them real quickly here. So, unattractive, actually, it's the opposite. Our users are high income. They are actually ideal customers. This makes sense for any of you if you think about it. It's not about coupons. These people and the things that we're offering are not for people that are destitute. We're not offering bulk rate cheese. It's fun things, it's exploring things, it's new restaurants, it's new things, new experiences. You're not doing that if you're in hard financial times. In fact, the number one reason why people leave Groupon is because they're experiencing financial difficulties in their life. If you lose your job, you're not going out and exploring new restaurants and doing things like that. So the people, they can actually afford full price. What are they doing this for? They're actually motivated by discovery, and it's all about toe in the water. So let me find something new. And if you look at the profile and the motivation and the needs of these people, our user base, it's because they're looking for a toe in the water. They want to explore things. They look at us as a discovery engine. One and done, that's a myth, actually. They return in droves, and there's a lot of data to prove that. 80% new customers. And the reason why I'm pummeling you with facts about this is because it's, I am a bit of a evangelist on this front, but it all points to a marketing and an advertising vehicle here that is still unmeasured, undocumented in many ways, although there's some great data on it. The story's not out, and the problem is, and this is kind of my challenge, is how do we get this and put this into a format that is accepted the way things like paid search or traditional advertising, television, radio, print, things like that. And I already said Groupon merchants are very satisfied. So I'll give you just a real high level. I'm going to have to zip through these super quickly, but an idea on how most people are thinking, oh, Groupon, it's about selling, massage for the local neighborhood place. We actually do a tremendous amount of national deals. And the power that we bring, and this is my biggest frustration on how do we try and measure this and create some kind of standards to measure this. And this is also part of the problem when I was at Shutterfly, is how do I compare this against something? We paid nothing for this as the client, and yet we sold so many of these. This is an example of one that we just did. And it was pretty quick. We did this and we sent them over 65,000 customers. There's a lot of other things then that were not originally measured. So the word of mouth, the future consideration numbers, the revisits, and the brand uptick, and the incremental spend. Overall, we were bringing a lot of money to this company in a very short amount of time, and there was no cash involved. It's not like a television campaign or even a radio campaign or a print campaign or something where there's a substantial upfront investment in all this. So this makes it a very different animal. Oh, and also I brought up this one too as another example of one that we recently did as far as product introduction and talking to the respondents in the back end. 43% of the people said, yes, I've tried this, I like it, I'm actually going to come back and try this again. Now, for those of you who are used to doing any kinds of marketing and follow-up research on that, to have numbers like this of people saying, absolutely, I'm coming back and I'm going to try this again, that's through the roof. Normally, it's single digits that you'd be happy to see on things like this. And I'm going to go zip through, well, these are more examples and I'm running out of time here. So, the idea here is that it's not just the local massage place, that we do national deals. This was about as CPG as you can get. It's in the grocery sector, and the results were through the roof. In fact, yeah, they were showing, they couldn't even believe it and having a tough time measuring it because they sold basically 5 years worth of product at their normal rates. Whereas normally in the CPG industry, let's say you're Pepsi or whoever, and you need to sell more that month, you end up discounting tremendously, you sell more that month, and then you don't sell any the next month and what we actually able to show is this is incremental spend, and that's what makes it so interesting, is that after the deal is done, it's not like you've, robbing Peter to pay for Paul. Okay. This is an example, well, I'm not going to have time to get into this, but looking at what counts and what is held up as great response rates on both Google and Facebook as far as click-through and an entire industry is being built on and lauded. And this is part of our frustration, is how do we compare against something like this when it's 0.051% click-through rate for Facebook ads, and it's just kind of a different world where we're saying, well, we're going to deliver 100,000 customers to your door, so we're not even talking about click-through or people even looking at this. They're actually going to go in and purchase your product. So it's getting back to the traditional, the marketing funnel. And when you're talking traditional advertising, you're trying to break into that early part of the funnel, awareness and consideration. And if you do a little bit of that and you're able to move, as I've done that over the years, I've worked at different companies where we do a big advertising campaign and you raise awareness 3 percentage points and everybody's doing high fives because it's a big success. And then when you're talking about direct response and some of these others, you may be able to get a little bit further down. And it is on a different plane. Groupon, we basically go right down to the bottom. We give all this away for free, and we're kind of held to a different standard. And that's my challenge for the group, is how do we come up with something that's going to make an even playing field, to make something that they can all be measured across. And I'm here very humbly to say, I tried this on my own. In fact, I did a big study last year, and this is a slide from that, looking at a lot of different merchants and asking them what are the different marketing tools that they're using, and asking them to kind of put this all together and evaluate each of them. And I learned two very valuable and humbling things from that. One is that most merchants out there, even in very big companies, don't do a very good job on tracking metrics and seeing the success or not success of their marketing programs. And number two is that just psychology, as a researcher, I should have known this. Not many marketers are willing to raise up their hand and said, yeah, I'm an idiot. I've been spending a lot of money on these different things and they're really not effective at all. So what happens is they end up measuring everything as kind of in the middle because they don't really know. And when you start probing in deeply on how you're measuring it, it shows that they're not really tracking things very well. And we've actually found that since day one at Groupon. Yeah, there are some merchants that are not as happy. Those are the merchants that are not tracking anything. There's like a straight linear line going along with satisfaction. In fact, if a merchant tells me exactly all the different things that he's tracking, I can almost pinpoint exactly how satisfied he is. And the more they're tracking, the more they like us, which is the good news. So, this is back to my challenge. Where does this fit in the marketing mix? What kind of metrics should these deals be tracking? Is this really, should it be viewed as a marketing expenditure or a profit driver? We think of it, well, it's both typically. And how can research help pull the dialogue up from conjecture and assumptions, which is much of what we're battling in the media, and with marketers out there that don't know any better, and bring it up to a level that's based on data and empirical evidence. So, that is my 1 hour squeezed into 10 minutes. And I guess we'll have a chance for some questions on the back end of the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Okay.
That whole myth-reality exercise is a useful exercise. We've been doing some work with that at the ARF with regard to media measurement, and I think it's one that might be helpful for businesses in general. What are the myths and what are the realities among our brands, our consumers, our users, whatever our business might be. The whole metrics point in tracking marketing programs, I think it's an important one that Eric mentioned there. I've got a friend who owns a small jewelry store in Cincinnati, and they've just started advertising on television. I'm talking to him about, well, is it making a difference? And he doesn't even know. And I'm thinking that that's probably not unusual for small businesses. And the whole idea of extending our metrics, future consideration, revisits brand uptick. I think there's a lot of value there. Thank you, Eric. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Brad Smallwood, who is the head of measurements and insights at Facebook, and looking forward to having him on the stage. Brad, welcome.
Okay, so nobody's been talking behind the podium, so I'm gonna do that. First of all, it's interesting to see some of the talks today. I think if I had to summarize them, it's about the consumer is changing, media is changing, how people are consuming media is changing, and it's really freaking hard to measure when things are constantly changing and to come up with consistent ways of measuring. I think that's kind of, when I look at the challenge of this group and the ARF and a lot of industry associations, it's like that's really the challenge. How do we measure in this kind of fast-paced changing world? Going back to those of you who have seen me talk before, I now feel obligated to show a picture of my dad at every time I present. So, it's always kind of a good jumping off point because my dad's a market researcher. When I was in high school, I was doing market research. I literally would go to car clinics. I would get, it wasn't slave labor, but it was pretty damn close. I would get shipped off to car clinics and sit there and take people's questions as they actually went through vehicles and said, oh, that's a great car, that's a not so great car. But that was kind of how research was done. It would be done every 3-ish years on the vehicles. And then they would come up with a major refresh every 3 years, or minor refresh every 3 years, and then a major refresh every 6. So, but that's kind of, and research was kind of supporting that, and the research was really, really slow. We would put these studies together, and about like 3 to 4 months later, we would deliver results. Thinking about kind of how the world's changing, that doesn't really kind of work as well anymore. So now I see what the clicker issue is. So when I started at Facebook, there was no measurement team, and I remember sitting down with Cheryl, and she's like, "Well, why do we need measurement? Why can't we just have other people measure? Why don't we just kind of go with the standard approaches?" And the answer I gave, and I guess I'll still give that answer now, is that as the previous Groupon example is, like, as you build out new mediums, you actually have to be thinking about how those new mediums are going to change how you go about measuring. And that's kind of the challenge for us, just like it is for Groupon, just like actually as it is for all of online. That's really the challenge. And going back to kind of TV, when TV really kind of hit that big inflection point is when Arthur Nielsen kind of came in and built this consistent way of measuring. And when he built that consistent way of measuring that all broadcasters were kind of using, what ended up happening? It became consistent, but it also actually became the buying metric. It became the way that people actually transacted business because it was so standard, and it was measurement that really kind of drove that change. And when we look at kind of where research layered on top of that, is that once we had this buying metric, the buying metric enabled us to consistently measure and then start getting insights that actually changed how we went about buying. So we were no longer buying, we started learning things, and this is, going back to Colin McDonald's paper, it's about how to think about frequency and how to control frequency and how frequency and consistent frequency drives impact, but there is a kind of a point of diminishing return, and understanding that point of diminishing return. And it's interesting when you think about how people buy on TV. These types of research things have become not just research. It's actually just truth. It's actually just truth, and that's how people make their decisions today. So now, when you think to digital, and when you think to kind of where the world's kind of evolving, it's like, well, what does it look like now? Like, how are we actually kind of building those new research systems, and how are we going to be able to provide insights when the world is changing faster than we can possibly keep up? We don't have 15, 20 years to build an audio meter. We have 6 months because, the mobile industry is absolutely exploding. Like, those are the challenges that we need to address, and that we want to focus kind of this group and the ARF on. So, I think we'll all kind of agree that the world is more complex today. It's a lot more complex when I was in school. I remember I'd go in and I would get a coffee. Now you go in and you get a coffee and it takes about 10 minutes to get your order out. But it's not just like those simplish things that are more complex. It's all of kind of how media consumption is happening. It's, you know, when you get up in the morning, you used to read a paper. When you came home, you know, a lot of people used to plop down on the couch and they would watch TV. Those were kind of the media consumptions. Now, when you think about it, people are consuming media throughout the day, and, you know, as we saw in the earlier presentation, when they're consuming media, lots of times they're consuming many different types of media all at the same time. So obviously, the consumer is in a much more complex world. But it's not just the consumer that's more complex. It's actually the marketing that's more complex. It used to be that you just buy a TV spot and you hope that what shows up, you know, that people will show up and they'll watch, and that's going to lead to impact. But when you think about it, now you actually have opportunities with digital to really kind of control who's going to see my message. And when they see my message, you know what? I don't want them to see 100 impressions. I want them to see 4. I want them to see 5. I want this person to see this creative and this person to see another creative. Those are kind of questions that people haven't had the opportunity or I guess ways of buying that they haven't had the opportunity before. And then the question is, how is measurement actually supporting that? And so when, you know, I go back to that conversation with Cheryl, it's like, that's really what my team's job is, but also it obviously just can't be, you know, a Facebook team or you know, a Google team or a Groupon team or whatever. It's actually got to be an industry, a research industry, and all of the kind of publishers kind of getting together to really consistently understand this and then drive for constant innovation in the industry. So when we kind of think about, and you know, there's been a lot of talk about Facebook and kind of mobile and how mobile is kind of changing Facebook and changing kind of all of online. I challenge people to think back a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and I would challenge you that most of you wouldn't have been thinking of mobile as this massive revolution that's kind of happening to how media is being consumed. Certainly 2 years ago, there wasn't much talk of tablets. They were just kind of coming on. I think it was about 2 years ago. But like, if you think about even 2 years ago, the whole way that we were thinking about consuming media was different. And now we're 2 years later, and all people can talk about is how to operate on a tablet, how to operate on a mobile device. And honestly, there's talk about like what's going to happen to the desktop, not just are these devices going to be big, but where is the desktop going to exist in a couple of years. So when we think about how we want marketers to kind of plan in today's world, it's what can we do to kind of help them plan more efficiently? How do we kind of build technologies that let them buy more efficiently? How do we let them take advantage of all these kind of great opportunities that exist? So when we think about like solving the problem, the way we think about it are two things. So, you know, the previous presentation was talking about how do I convince advertisers about ROI, and I would posit that that's a good question, but not the right question. The right question is not just demonstrating ROI, but actually how do we work with them by putting all of those kind of pixels on and all of those understandings about what worked to actually build measurement techniques that let them build better campaigns. Like, that's what success looks like. And when you think back to TV, that's what TV actually did. What TV did is they built consistent measurement, and then they built media mix models. They built they built like these studies, these massive studies that looked at frequency. They built consistent ways of measuring it, and then what they were able to do is able to say, how do I actually make campaigns better? How do I buy TRPs more effectively? How do I buy this show versus that show? And that's really what leads to success in the long haul. And when you think back even to search, Search does exactly the same thing. Search has clicks, and they have CPA, and they have analytics that sits on top of that, and they give people insights into what's working, and then they give them that feedback, and that feedback leads to really positive reinforcement, and that's how you actually end up driving success. So that's really the challenge for the industry. When we think about kind of what's going on in the industry, I think there's actually a lot of work that's going on here. When you look at OCR, VCE, when you look at viewability, when you look at the 3MS initiatives, those are these great initiatives that for the first time are getting people to consistently not just think about impressions, but to think about accountability for people like us, for publishers and all advertisers or all publishers, to say, you know what, I'm going to demand that you deliver within certain parameters. Like, that kind of accountability and consistency is great because that's what leads to standards. When we look at that, you look at companies like Group M, who's actually changing their way of buying to actually focus on buying on the GRPs, the OCR GRPs that come out. When you think about Hulu and AOL on their video products, they're actually running guarantees against those types of measures. Like, that's what it looks like in kind of that, how do we deliver effectively? And when we think about kind of Facebook, what have we been focused on? We've been focused a lot on kind of that second thing when you're looking at campaigns. How do you actually figure out what works? Not just the ROI. We've done a lot of massive studies about the ROI that's actually getting delivered on campaigns. But how do we actually understand what's working within the campaigns and what's driving success? And so we've run a bunch of studies with Datalogix looking at that and demonstrating, it's not just the click that's creating value, it's actually the impression that creates a lot of the value. When we look at campaigns that focus on, it'll switch eventually, there we go. When we look at campaigns that focus on reach, those campaigns on average have a 70% higher ROI. The ones that focus on reach, not just actions that happen on campaigns. And when we look at frequency, we're able to look at an individual campaign level and demonstrate the sweet spot where we kind of see the point of diminishing returns on a frequency curve for an individual campaign. We can do it overall, we can do it in aggregate, but we can also look at individual campaigns and demonstrate what's actually working. And what leads to success. And so I guess just kind of in closing, I think the real opportunity for us as an industry is kind of to get together and to come up with these consistent measures and focus not just on the ROI that happens, but actually focus on the insights that actually comes out in a consistent way, and not just for one publisher or one study, but to do it consistently across all of the advertising that you do. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Media marketing are definitely more complex. I wonder if, and I thought, Brad's point, they're constant. Media is constant, marketing is constant. I wonder if measurement's constant. Maybe it should be, and maybe it is. Measurement and insights are really designed to build better campaigns. We'll have a conversation about that. And the whole idea of collaborating to focus on consistent measures that drive the business ahead and drive insights. Interesting thoughts.